Hey, Scott Hambrick, scotthambrick.com and onlinegreatbooks.com. Today I'm going to rebroadcast a YouTube live appearance I did on the Cotto-Gottfried show. You can go to YouTube and look up Cotto-Gottfried and check out their feed. Interesting guys, paleo cons. Mr. Gottfried was a student of Herbert Marcuse for a time and has come off of that sort of political order that he once followed, and is a super interesting guy. Mr. Gottfried wasn't on this show. I'll be on there in the future with him, and I look forward to that. But I thought it was a good show, and I just wanted to rebroadcast this. And I'm just going to rebroadcast it in full with all of their intro stuff as well. So go check out the Cotto-Gottfried show. I think it's a good one, typically. I enjoy doing this, and let me know what you guys think, because I do a lot of podcast guest appearances, and I may start rebroadcasting them here on this channel. I also did one very recently with Carl Shute on the Uncommon Sense podcast, which is done by the Society of G.K. Chesterton. I think that's a pretty good show as well. And of course, all of my podcast guest appearances, I always put them on scotthambrick.com. So, with that being said, I'll just launch you guys right to the show I did with Joseph Cotto of the Cotto-Gottfried podcast.
How's it going, everyone? Don't worry, there is video. It's about to start. This is not audio only. I just want to say that for whatever reason, I discovered after downloading this video from YouTube that about a minute or two or something like that had been cut out. I have no idea why. It was a very unpleasant surprise. But when the video does begin, you're going to be thrown right into it, into the conversation. So it will be a little jarring. Don't worry, it's not your computer malfunctioning or anything like that. It just happened. Like I said, I don't know why, but it is what it is. And I will say, before the discussion between Scott Hambrick and myself begins, Scott, of course, is the man behind Online Great Books. And we're going to be discussing the great books and their relevance to life today, to current events. It might sound a bit odd, the idea that great books, these old texts, can somehow have a great deal of relevance to what's going on now, but oh, they do. They really do. So before the discussion begins, I will just say that I, of course, am Joseph Cotto, and Cotto-Gottfried is sponsored by Alaska Chaga. To see why their chaga may be a great fit for you, please click on the link below. This show gets 10% of any purchase you make. In times like these, it is important to support businesses that are willing to support shows like this. So what are you waiting for? Check out Alaska Chaga. Also, do you want to understand the world around you and maybe even yourself a bit better than you do now? Are you looking for answers to some of life's greatest questions, even if they are the most difficult ones? Maybe you just want to learn something new. In any case, Online Great Books may be just what you are looking for. When you sign up for a course there by following the link below, Cotto-Gottfried gets $45. Learn about the past insight on our present and the future by learning at Online Great Books. Knowledge is power.
More likely it is that it will become even older yet. So the example I normally give is like a Ming vase. People have protected that thing as a work of art for maybe 1,000 years. And then so the chances of people continuing to protect that so others in the future would have it are very high. But a Coca-Cola can, it's probably a week old. You drink the Coke and you're probably going to throw it away, are very high. So Coca-Cola can, the Lindy effect says that the older something is, the more likely the age of something is a proxy for its utility, because the difficulty of maintaining things, whether it's ideas or even physical objects, is very high over time. And these books have been they've been passed down through the sieve of time. Before Gutenberg, people had to kill, 600 lambs and then skin them and make parchment from their skin and then copy by hand every word of Plato's dialogues so that people in the future would get them. We don't have a lot of resources. We don't have a lot of time to hand copy books. So it means that these very, very old books are the most important things that these copyists and these academics could have passed on to future generations. And in many cases, they risked their lives to hide these books and make sure that their grandkids and that ultimately we could read them. And the ideas in some of these books, well, the beauty and the art that is in Homer, the ideas and the big questions that are posed by Plato, the answers that are given by people like Aristotle, in my opinion, haven't been surpassed. And we can try as we might, but I don't think they can be. Right now, well, maybe not now, but probably for the last 100 years, academia has had a push to publish. So most work in philosophy and in thought is underwritten by university systems somewhere where there is this pressure to publish and not teach necessarily. And if you're going to publish something new, if you're going to publish something original, and knowing that people like Plato, Aquinas, Aristotle, Hobbes, and others have already written, and you want to be original, and they've already done something very wonderful, you're frankly going to have to make something up. The chances of somebody proposing something original now that's brilliant and a breakthrough on top of all of the work that these giants have done before us is very unlikely. So I think as time goes on, the chances of us adding legitimate works to the Western canon goes down over time. So that means that these old books are groundbreaking, and in many cases, no one has done it better since then. Aristotle's work, when I can read Aristotle's works, we always go right to the source.
One question before we get into some other things that comes to my mind is, how can one be sure that the works that are attributed to Aristotle or Plato or others, how can one be sure that those are the actual works? Because as you mentioned, we've relied on people who had to transcribe their stuff throughout the ages in a very, painstaking sort of way, writing it out by hand until the printing press came along. And that certainly seems to me like it leaves many opportunities for misstatements, either intentional or not. But I think there's a good chance that we're not truly understanding the ancients as they expressed themselves back in the day.
Yeah, that certainly is a risk. At Online Great Books, just last night, in fact, I was in a seminar and we were talking about Plato, and there are some of the dialogues that some academics aren't sure that he wrote that are attributed to him right now. And my answer to that is, who cares? Like, what if a guy named Steve wrote them? Like, we can still read them and evaluate the brilliance that's in those things, regardless of who it was. But for example, Homer, I don't think that the same person wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. I really don't. I've read both of them many, many times. I don't have the Greek to go through the whole thing in the Greek, but I really don't think they were written by the same person. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The content stands on its own. If the complete works of Plato were by an anonymous group at the academy, which was his school, I don't think it would diminish what they were at all. The same thing for Aristotle. The work, if you read the works, they stand on their own.
Mm-hmm. And now, I guess getting into what your work is, how do you seek to popularize the great books? Because obviously you don't expect people to go down to the library and crack open some, old volume and start reading that. You have undergone a very interesting process to make this stuff accessible to people on their level. Please, I guess, get into the nature of this.
Yeah. Well, at onlinegreatbooks.com, we want everyone to read these books. We have people that read them. We have plumbers and nurses and homeschooling moms and heating and air technicians and farmers, just all kinds of people. And all of this started with me trying to homeschool my own kids and realizing I had huge holes in my education. I have a science and technology background, and I wanted to fill those sort of liberal arts holes in my education. And I found Mortimer Adler's Great Books Foundation and decided to start a Great Books group in my home, and did that. One of the guys in my group is Brett McKay of Art of Manliness, and he said, "Man, this is great. You need to do this online somehow and get more people to do this." And we started working on that. And from the lessons in my home group, where we started with Plato and really struggled, Everybody in my home group are smart. They're dedicated. There are engineers and doctors in that group, and we found that we were taught to read at public schools, most of us, and we were taught in the 70s and 80s because we're all in our kind of in our 40s, and we were taught to skim and scan. We were taught to read quickly. We were taught to read for the quiz on Friday. And we weren't taught to read difficult, close reading of a strenuous material like this. So we stopped our work with Plato, and we went and got Mortimer Adler's book, How to Read a Book, and did a in-depth study of that text, and then started at the very beginning of the canon, which is Homer's Iliad. And off we went. And so that's the way we start our people at Online Great Books. We have about 10,000 people on our mailing list, and I'll call some of them every now and then and say, hey, why haven't you joined us? Not to pressure you, but just so I can learn how to do a better job of presenting this. And one answer they give us is, well, it costs too much. Well, it's $59 a month. I can't help them with that. But the second most popular answer is they don't think they can do it. And I say that everyone can. It takes some it takes a little acclimatization. We go read How to Read a Book, and then we start with Homer. And then 1 week after you start with Homer, we do these. We do close readings, we call them. We have these sessions where you can come to one of our meetings. And Mark Swick, who works with us, and he's been with the Great Books Foundation for about 15 or 20 years. He's left them. He's now with us. He teaches how to do close reading of difficult material, and he actually shepherds these people through book 1 of the Iliad. And then we do a seminar, and like St. John's College, we steal a lot of ideas from them. We believe that the close reading is actually done in the seminar. That's when we come together and bring all the consciousness of all the people in the group to bear on the text. We believe that close reading is done there. So we do our best with the close reading as we can. We make notes about the things we have questions about, the things that we think are incomplete in the text, the things that we disagree with. We bring that to the seminar, and then together, because it takes the brains of everybody in the seminar to even contend with somebody like Plato, then we can wrestle it out and deepen our understanding of the thing. And we also let them know that a lot of these texts are very, very difficult. And if you get through one of these, if you get through Plato's Republic and you get 5% of it, you've done very, very well. We're the university. We're not a school. We're not a university. So we read these things for our own purposes. And we always want to remind people, you're not getting a grade. Mortimer Adler tells us we read for the purpose of going from a state of less understanding to one of more understanding. And as long as you've moved towards more understanding, that time was well spent. And you do that day after day, 30 minutes a day. And at the end of a year, you're a transformed person. And insofar as you do this process with one of these great authors, you get to partake in their consciousness some. Like who wouldn't want to do that?
There is a question in the live chat from Wojak Woes. Would you consider, pardon me? Never mind. No, I thought you were saying something. Would you consider Hilaire Belloc a great thinker?
For the Online Great Books podcast, we just did a show on, actually, I think it comes out Thursday, on Belloc's The Restoration of Property. It's a work of economics. I think Belloc is a great teacher. I think he's a great explainer. But I'm not a Belloc scholar. I agree with most of what I've read of Belloc, but I don't know that he's a great thinker insofar as bringing new ideas to the world. I think he does a very good job, particularly in his works on economics and sociology, on explaining how Aquinas's view and the scholastic view of how society should be put together would then like overlay on the modern era, and why we should maybe reject modernity and embrace some of those sort of medieval economic social standards. So I think he's a great teacher and a great bridge, but I don't know how many new ideas. So, when you say great thinker, for me, my standard is Are they exposing a new truth to us that has never been seen before? And that's a high standard. And if that's the case, I would say no. But I respect him a great deal, and he's on my bookshelf. And I'm making my oldest daughter read Restoration of Property right now. So how about that?
Well, I don't know if Wojak was addressing this to me as well, but I'll just share my thoughts. I am a man of the Enlightenment, so I'm not a Belloc fan. Do think he was a very intelligent guy, though, and he did manage to present views that were very multifaceted and controversial in a way that is very direct, as I noticed. And he was very good at say spreading propaganda. That might be a bit strong, but he was very good at promoting ideas in it that are not popular or interesting, it would seem, in a way that makes them accessible, I think, to the average Jack or Jill. So Belloc definitely did have that going for him. I will say, if anybody else has a reasonable and responsible question or comment for Scott or myself, please do leave it in the live chat as a super chat, and we shall get to it. Thank you very much in advance. So, Scott, looking at the great books, I mean, there are so many of them to get into, but a lot of folks will look at the world around them and say, I really don't see why this ancient wisdom or knowledge, interesting as it might be, is relevant to, some sort of social issue or some sort of political issue or some sort of economic, development, or maybe it's not relevant to why your wife is divorcing you. Obviously not you, Scott, but I just mean the proverbial you. But so what would you say to this perspective? Because it's something that I can very easily imagine hearing, and it's something that absolutely deserves to be addressed.
Yeah, if you think there's such a thing as truth, capital T, and you think there are valid ways to test truth claims, then I think that you would have to believe that that would have been accessible to anyone at any time, particularly about humans, right? Like, we're not technological achievements in and of ourselves, or, well, maybe we are, but there's nothing that the 2020 version of humans isn't much different than this 1974 version. Human nature hasn't changed, in my opinion. And so if you think that there is such a thing as truth, and you think there is such a thing as human nature, then there isn't anything about the modern era that would expose any of that. That wasn't available to somebody like Aristotle or Plato. We do have instrumentation that Aristotle didn't have. So if you go read Aristotle's physics and some of his stuff, work on biology, it'll seem quaint. But the thing to learn from there is not what his theory of gravity was, but how he obtained that theory of gravity with the meager tools that he had. Right? The way you get to, when you read Aristotle on physics, you get to witness how probably the smartest man who ever lived reasoned through a problem with the tools he had. So his conclusion isn't what's necessarily important there, although I think it is. It's watching or getting to see firsthand, really, how the man's mind works, and then learn from that so that you can then mirror that. In physics, I love doing seminars on Aristotle's physics. He says that rocks just want to be on the ground. It's in their nature to just be on the ground. That's where they want to be. Well, we say that gravity pulls to the center of the earth, that objects tend to rest as near the center of the earth as they can. Our explanation of gravity has no more explanatory power than Aristotle's. But when you read it, you think, oh, isn't that funny? Isn't that quaint? No, it's just as good as our explanation. We have no idea what gravity is. We have no idea where it really comes from. We have no more explanation about it than he does. So I think it's really easy for a modern to sneer at some of this stuff. But if 1,000 monks copy that thing by hand for 3,000 years, not quite 3,000 years, but there's probably something in it that we can learn from. We need to be open-minded about that thing just as much as we would be some damned article that comes out in Nature magazine this week.
What's interesting, I suppose, is that in recent years there has been a sort of push to, especially Aristotle, to sort of deconstruct him or to discourage belief in his ideas. And it said that, searching for a truth is not really, or the truth, I should say, is not really a great move because there are many different truths, and it's relative to the person who's trying to understand any given situation what the truth really is. This is, I think, where a lot of Eastern philosophies come in, which are more interested in relationships than facts of various matters. So that is something that has taken hold in certain, I guess, sectors of the chattering class over the last few generations, even though a lot of these same people would not like Eastern philosophies in totality because they are quite traditionalists themselves, just in a different way than Western ones are. What is your take on this, Scott?
It's impossibly dumb. To say that there's no such thing as truth, or that truth would vary from person to person, is a truth claim itself. And they're wrong from the very beginning. It's soft-headed, it's infantile, and it doesn't even deserve respect. The minute they open their mouth and say that there's no such thing as an absolute truth, or that truth varies between Joseph and Scott, is a truth claim in and of itself. And so either they're right, in which case the stuff they're saying is wrong, which still would prove our point, or they're wrong, and there are such things as truth claims. It's just not even worth talking about. It's not a serious idea. And the fact that people buy that is a sign that we live in a failed society, frankly, and makes me very sad. Somebody in the chat says I look like a shaved Mark Stein. That's hilarious. I love that.
I guess compliments abound.
I don't know. I actually don't know Mark Stein. I had to look him up. And I'm like, yeah, I can see the resemblance. He may be a dick. I don't know.
I was going to say that, it's interesting because right now, in a lot of philosophy departments, it's not accurate to say, I brought up Eastern philosophies, but that really is just a way of comparing, truth-oriented stuff like Western philosophy to relationship-oriented stuff like Eastern philosophy. But in academia now, in various philosophy departments, it's postmodernism that really is all the rage, along with critical theory, of course. They're both there. You really can't exclude one with and say that this is the whole story. It's two different schools of thought that are really having an influence on how philosophy is perceived in academia, and of course that has an influence on how people wind up viewing the world around them, because young impressionable minds hear what these professors have to say, and they then go on to influence the broader society. So, Scott, anything to say about the influence of postmodernism and the critical theory in relation to Aristotelian thought and the great books, moreover?
Oh, gosh, I almost don't even know. I almost don't even know what.
Take as long as you need. It's fine.
We tell people at Online Great Books that if you have a shipping address so we can get the book to you, a credit card, a valid credit card, and you believe there's such a thing as truth, then you can do this. Then you can do this work. And so many people in our country don't believe there's such a thing as an absolute truth. And like you say, it comes from postmodernism. It comes from the Frankfurt School. It comes from this cultural critique culture that really has its root in universities. I think they're enemies of the state. I think that cancel me, whatever. I think if you send your kids there, it's child abuse, and it's going to be the ruin of us. It's just going to be the ruin of us. We're getting ready, the Online Great Books podcast, a week from Thursday. Thursday's the 5th, so what is that? The 12th. Our show is going to be about Herbert Marcuse's essay "Repressive Tolerance," where he talks about when the people tolerate existing structures. When we tolerate, I'm gonna put a few words in his mouth here, but I think I'll be generous. When you tolerate the behavior of the police, the behavior of academia, the acceptance of Aristotle as the philosopher, like Aquinas would call him, then that tolerance allows the repressive system to continue. We have to be intolerant of the existing structure. Well, he has no room. And so I've read this, and I've read this many times here, and he has no room to allow for anything in any existing structure in our country to be true or good or beautiful. His culture, this culture of critique, and Marcuse's approach has no way to test anything for its validity and to embrace an idea that exists. They can only destroy. That's the only thing that you can do. It's the natural conclusion from Marcuse's work, is to destroy things that exist, both ideas and physical objects. It is not a philosophy that will allow for creation. And now, the sophomore at State U near you may not be seeing that in this. But if you've read Aristotle, and you've read Aquinas, and you've read Plato, and you've read Hobbes, and even that pig Mills, you'll know, John Stuart Mill, you'll know that Marcuse and these people aren't putting forth a philosophy that you can build anything good, beautiful, or true on. And we're reaping that right now. It leads to fire, and I don't know what else to say about it than that. It makes me angry, and we need to how about this, Marcuse? We need to be completely intolerant of that view in that philosophy, in my opinion.
It's interesting. My co-host Paul Gottfried, who unfortunately is not joining us tonight, but he was a pupil of Herbert Marcuse's, and he has a very high opinion of Marcuse as a teacher. They got along very well, but he does not agree with Marcuse's politics. He pointed out to me, I forget if it was in public or in private, but he did say that I think it was in public actually, the cultural Marxists have become much more radical since Marcuse. They took his ideas and they built upon it essentially the doctrine of intersectionality. And Marcuse, therefore, is actually something of a moderate compared to these people. So it's quite interesting to see that what we're seeing today is actually more radical than what Marcuse cooked up. And what he cooked up was certainly radical in and of itself.
I'm sure Mr. Gottfried knows a great deal more about him than I do, but everything that I read in Marcuse, I don't see him putting the brakes on his philosophy. I think that the natural conclusion of his philosophy is what we're getting. He himself may have been unwilling to take his philosophy of intolerance to the extent that it has now. He personally may have been a much more moderate and genteel man than that.
But he was definitely, but you're also correct about there being no breaks. Sorry, I just had to throw that in because when Paul sees this, if I didn't throw that in, he would be angry at me. So please continue.
Yeah, I think it's the natural conclusion. But I will say, I agree with him about a number of things in here. He thinks that the average person in our society has aligned their personal interest with the mainstream political view. They don't try to get the mainstream political view to follow their interests. They find a way to align themselves with that so that they can be economically successful and fit in with society. He also is disgusted by the juxtaposition of news stories with advertising. So you get a sunny news story. He's a Hegelian, so you see this positive advertisement for tooth whitening, maybe juxtaposed with some story about trouble in the Middle East. So for Marcuse, he sees that there's going to be a Hegelian dialectic there. We see the thesis, the antithesis, and then the synthesis is going to be something where the person who reads the newspaper or the blog doesn't see things as grimly as they should, because of that juxtaposition between the tooth whitening with the attractive family in the commercial, and then the story about the rock throwing in Palestine or whatever. So I share some of his disgust with media, with political attitudes of the normies. But I think his conclusions, I think his philosophy is disgusting, and I wish Gottfried was here. That'd be great fun.
From Wojak Woes, your thoughts on Adam Smith, the moral philosopher? I
Oh
think this
man.
is clearly more intended for Scott than me, but I'll share my views after he's done. I would say if anybody else has a reasonable, responsible question for Scott or myself, please do leave in the live chat, super chat. We shall get to it. Thank you in advance. Scott, please go ahead.
Oh man, you know what? I am not qualified to say this. I have to answer this. I've read on the Wealth of Nations, but I haven't read his Theory of Moral Sentiments. It's on my infinity stack. You know, I gotta get to it, but I don't have anything to. I don't really have anything to say about it. You do see some of his more. You do see little glimpses of it in his economic works, but I don't. I have nothing to add there. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, sir.
I think that I'm not an expert at Adam Smith by any means. I have read some of his moral and economic philosophy. I think he's stronger at economics than morality, but he is definitely more in my corner on morality than, say, Hilaire Belloc is. So I think that Adam Smith, on the whole, was a very good philosopher. I don't think that a lot of his views are terribly practical in the present day and age, but I do think that he did more to promote the interests of the individual, and he tried to create a society based upon individual concerns more than any other philosopher I could think of since the Reformation, with the exception perhaps of Spinoza. I think Spinoza and Adam Smith are on the same level, so it's kind of hard to really, I think, say one's more important than the other. But that's my take there, Wojak. I think that Adam Smith is a very great guy to read. I have profound respect for him. He definitely brought something original to the table in terms of economics and his philosophy of morality, as did Spinoza, by the way, but he was really more about morality and mankind's relationship with the universe than anything economic. So that's my point of view there. Excellent question, by the way, Wojak. And were you going to say something, Scott?
Well, there are a couple in here that aren't super chats. Can we get some of these?
Well, we do super chat for the show whenever I have a guest or whenever it's with Paul. It would be unfair to read non super chats. And have others pay the super chat. But I would encourage people to leave their stuff in as a super chat, because there is some good stuff in the chat. I really wish folks would do that. There is another super chat from Wojak. Both please speculate. How did the cultural Marxist ideas like truth is relative flourish in the institutions so effortlessly and went unchallenged? That's really good. I'll let Scott get to that first, but it's an excellent question.
Me first? Dang it, man. Well, this is interesting. I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I think it's just the nature of the right. Marcuse says that the right has a big advantage because they have all the money, and the left doesn't have money because they're the left. And I think that's actually mostly true. And so he says, we have to do things that don't require money. And he just targeted education. He just hammered on it. And they were right to do that. And then the right really just wants to be left alone. The right truly is tolerant. And the right really wants to do good work. They want to pursue the good, the beautiful, and the true. And they aren't like intellectually evangelical. They're not trying to sway your child and make your child a right-wing minion. And they just, frankly, from the very turn of the 20th century, they ceded the educational space to the left, and they lost the country. And the end. I mean, they just lost it. It's just the nature of the right. They don't know how they don't know how they just don't know how to win. And by the way, Marcuse worked for the United States government for a time.
Yes, he did.
And for Republican government, by the way. Marcuse, as left as he was, and by the way, Marcuse is not Marxist. He's a critic of Marx, as best as I can tell. He worked for the Office of War Information. He worked for the OSS during World War II. He got out and he ended up working for the Department of State. But in 1951, he's working for the Department of State. Well, who's the State Department headed up by? It's Eisenhower, the Republican. So, Somebody in the chat here says right failed at game theory. The right doesn't even know what the game is. The right doesn't even know what political power is used for. They don't understand the proper function of government. They think the proper function of government is to leave you alone, and that's the effect. But how do you actually do that? I don't think they understand it, so they lose at every turn. We've been losing for 100 years. It's awesome.
There's something very interesting here about what Wojak wrote, and how I think one of the reasons that these culturally Marxist ideas flourish is because they are adaptable to the individual while still having a strong ideological framework that draws the individual into the collective. And that might sound like a totally contradictory thing, but it is the truth. Because if you say have an Aristotelian perspective and you say that the truth is the truth whether we like it or not, that's not adaptable to the individual, because obviously there are going to be a lot of people who don't like what the truth is and they're going to rebel against it. But cultural Marxism saying everything is subjective, you make up your own thing as you go along, but at the same time there are these societal constructs that have to be deconstructed. It gives people, number one, something to oppose. It gives them something to blame for their problems other than themselves. But number two, it adapts to their unique point of view in a way that objective philosophies interested in objective truth simply do not. So this is something very unique to cultural Marxism. It's also unique to postmodernism in that it's another sort of choose your own adventure, make it up as you go along type of deal. So there's a lot of stuff here that is on the left that is highly adaptable to the individual, even though it tries to draw the individual into a collective. It's very versatile. You have to give these philosophies credit. They're tremendously versatile in a way that focusing on objective truth is not, because the truth is going to repel a lot of people. For instance, if it is true that politically speaking, if a certain policy, an economic policy, say we had universal basic income, and the government says that this can happen, it's fine, there's no way that it'll ever stop. Meanwhile, there's not going to be enough money to sustain this, say beyond another 5-year period. If somebody comes out from the government and says, there's no way to sustain this, and they're just using the facts, that person will be pilloried. But if somebody has a perspective that, there are some problems, but it doesn't really matter what the statistics show because they're relative to the person who crunched them, and that person does not like what UBI stands for. So we're going to then deconstruct these forces in society that are preventing UBI from really functioning in the long run. That second perspective that I mentioned is going to be a hell of a lot more popular with people than the first one is. And that really explains why cultural Marxist ideas are so popular in terms of how they're applied. I said a lot there, Scott. Anything to say about it before we move along?
No, I agree. I mean, it's going to be much easier to get people on board with the idea that truth is relative, right? That's a big tent, as opposed to say, there is a correct answer. This is what it looks like. This is how you get to that answer. So it has a broader appeal, and like you said, it does have some sort of ideological power behind it. People can get strident about that, and they can be lazy in it and feel good about it. But I also think there's a big, I think resentment has a lot of power here. I think that there is a group of people that have resentment about all kinds of things, going back as far as their potty training, maybe even that bring them to this culture of critique. If truth is relative, it would explain a lot of their own failings and a lot of the bad things that have happened to them, and it lets them slough off that responsibility, and it lets them explain something about the universe in a way that lets them sleep at night, frankly, and they're drawn to it, and I think there's a vacuum. I think there's a vacuum left by the weakness of religion in our society, and that helps. That has also helped fill that vacuum. I think that humans have a spiritual need that must be met. That they got to feed the body and the soul, and their souls aren't getting fed, and they find a way to get it fed there sometimes. That also makes me unhappy.
Well, it's interesting because wokeness, social justice warfare, PC ideology, whatever you want to call it, is pretty much all the same thing. It is replacement religion for Christianity in our society. I came to that conclusion quite a while ago. It fulfills the need that many people have for self-sacrifice, for penance, especially a public form of it, and also gives people a reason to sort of believe that there is a better future and that they can create a utopia of sorts, except the utopia, obviously, of PC wokeness is on Earth, and in Christianity, it's in the next world. So that is, I think, the big appeal of PCSJW wokeness, and why I think it won't be going away anytime soon. And I don't think this is just like a political trend or a fad. I think that it is very much a replacement religion for Christianity. And I'm a secular guy, and even I can see this. So it's not really a matter of advocating for one religion or another. I just think this is a sociological change in American life, and it's not going to reverse itself anytime soon. Anything to say about that, Scott, before we move along?
Yeah, I agree with that. The pendulum is not swinging back to where it was at any given time in the past. It's just not going to. This is the new religion. The people canceling others for their non-politically correct speech. They're a bunch of scolds looking for blasphemers, and they've redefined what blasphemy is, and they're neo-puritanical. It's a new religion, and it's going to be a long time going away. And I'm afraid that that starvation and drought and war and pestilence is what's going to make it go away, and not ideas and conversation. I wish that wasn't true, but it's that whole postmodernism really makes people immune to healthy argument and conversation and thought, and but they're never immune to starvation or the ill effects of their philosophy. And I think that's what's going to bring it about. Darn it.
There's something I want to get to about that, but there is something from Mark Erjavec here in the chat. What about Charles Darwin's books? I don't think Charles Darwin was really all that interested in philosophy, Mark. He was more of a scientist, but he certainly did bring new thought, a serious new thought, groundbreaking insights into the development of living organisms. So I don't think he would be considered the author of a great book by a philosophical standard, but he would be considered the author of a great book by a scientific standard. Scott, anything to say about what Mark brought up?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, it's certainly not philosophy, but just like everything else, he gets kind of drug into philosophy. Like, we tend to think that evolution, that his ideas about evolution apply to everything, that technology evolves to a higher form, that even animals evolve to a higher form. And that's not necessarily true. It could be that more base forms have an evolutionary advantage over more refined forms of certain animals. But these scientific ideas are often drug into the philosophical sphere. There's a PhD paper somewhere, I think, for someone to write about how Einstein and Heisenberg and the early 20th century physicists influenced postmodern thought. Right, when Newtonian physics and the work of Galileo and Ptolemy and all those before them were essentially negated by Einstein, I think that was an inspiration to certain philosophers to find the new theory of relativity for sociological and philosophical thought. And I don't think that that's true. I don't think you can do that. But you'll hear people say everything is relative. Well, where the hell did that come from? I mean, it's a perversion of Einstein's work, which was a lot of which was stolen. But we so often in this post-Enlightenment, we're gonna have to go like 4 hours on the Enlightenment versus the medieval period. But in the post-Enlightenment period, we tend to think that science holds an answer for what the good life is and for the human condition. And I don't think that's true, but we often drag people like Darwin or Einstein into that. And we end up with people like Carl Sagan. I have no problem with Sagan, but people looking to people like Carl Sagan or even Neil deGrasse Tyson for answers about how people should act and what the good life is and what should we do about society today. And just because they're good at math and know how to figure out where stars are or whatever the heck their thing is doesn't necessarily mean they know what the good life is. So that's one of the things that bugs me about that. How about that? I could go on about Newton too. Newton's infinitesimal calculus um, uh, changed the way the human mind thought about space and all kinds of uh, of other problems. Because I think before him, while people did think about infinity, they didn't think about it in the same way that he did, and then thought about infinity became more popular and may not have been helpful. How about that?
Well, it's interesting because looking at what people do with the writings of Darwin, it's like what they do with the writings of Marcuse. They take it to a new level and then they attribute everything to the author, even though Darwin and Marcuse have very solid views. And particularly in the case of Marcuse, there is no break that he provided. A lot of his, or the people, they probably know who he was, but they follow his ideas today. They despise the United States. He did not. They despised the West in and of itself. He wanted to deconstruct a lot of things in the West, but he did not despise the Western tradition on the whole. He was a very unique fellow with eclectic views, but a definite leftist perspective all the same. But you just see people amplifying the writings of these guys who accomplished quite a lot into, essentially self-help guides. And, that's where you get somebody asking Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's a very brilliant fellow, for information about how they should live. It reaches a point of absurdity for sure, and that really can't be downplayed.
Yeah, just because somebody has an area of expertise doesn't mean they have expertise in all areas. And I got to be careful with that. We all do. But again, I'm with Marcuse on this. The media just goes crazy. They find somebody who can give error answers, and they ask them for answers about everything. And they draw eyeballs, and then it's off to the races. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now. I would say that, there is something interesting, at least in my view, about the relationship between cultural Marxism, which is different than economic Marxism, but and the postmodern school. There are two different ideas, but they do blend together nowadays in academia. And there are some similarities between them, and probably a good idea to get into these. Scott, why do you think that postmodernism and cultural Marxism, the critical theory, that's what I'm referring to as cultural Marxism, the critical theory, why do you think they go together so well in academia today? Do you think there's any reason for that? Is it just because everybody hates the great books essentially, and so they're trying to get as many ideologies together to combat them, or do you think there's something else at work here?
I think there's something else at work. I mean, I believe what they say. They're trying to deconstruct what we have and build something different. They have to tear everything down before they can build something different. Now, they all disagree about what should be built afterwards, but they all agree on that this needs to go. They just do. It's that I believe in Hegel and others talk about resentment. I think they want it gone. They feel like they've been wronged by society and they want it destroyed. And those are the tools they use. I don't think that there's a smoky room full of fat cats talking about the plans, but I think it's an emergent movement of this will probably get me in trouble. Broken people who yearn for power.
I agree entirely, and it is interesting just how much power means to these folks. One thing that I have learned is that a lot of people on the right, and I used to fall into this camp. Not all my views are on the right, but they do pool there. I call myself a socio-political realist because I just try to analyze things as realistically and impartially as I can. But a lot of people do say of the left, well, you're being inconsistent. You're being inconsistent. You weren't saying this last week. Ha, ha, ha. Now we've got you because we can prove that you don't really mean what you say because you're changing your view. And what I've learned is that, you can say this until the cows come home, but the cows are not going to win you an election. And the left really does adhere to a school of thought that doesn't matter what they say. And this really is, I think, postmodernism. There's a critical theory here as well, the uber subjectivity, but this is really postmodernism. It doesn't matter what we say, it just matters essentially what the outcome is. And since, we have no real truth anyway, if we say something that completely counters what we were saying last week, as long as it gets us to power, that's fine. We're just sort of going along with things as they are, and that's really all there is to write home about. Scott, do you have anything to say about this point of view, and I guess how people on the right often misunderstand where the left is coming from philosophically?
Yeah, they completely misunderstand it. This is what I was talking about earlier. They don't even understand what the game is. We are not in an ideological game. This is all about tribalism and acquisition of power by any means, and there's no debate or discussion to be had. There's no compromise. Any compromise you have, which moves you off your point, is a win for them. And you can go read. Oh my gosh, Saul Alinsky describes how to use this Hegelian process to do this. Marcuse describes it. You've got to believe what their thinkers and what their leaders say, and they are not ideological in their method. And they don't have the intellectual integrity that the right thinks they have, and it's only about acquisition of power. We're in a post-ideological political environment, and the sooner we realize that, the better off we're going to be. It's dialectic just won't work. It's just not going to work. You go to whatever march is happening in a city near you, and try to buy a guy a cup of coffee and bring him around to your viewpoint, is probably going to get a bottle broke on your head. That's not where we are. Those days are over, guys. We're all fighting the last war. That war, it's a new war. It's a new political war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of folks, and there's two good things here in the chat I want to get to, but there's a lot of folks on the right who just constantly misunderstand and misanalyze the situation the way which you've described. They really believe that they'll be able to get leftist activists tripped up over their own words because they're being inconsistent. And this goes to show how the right really is more concerned about objective facts than the left is, even though the left claims to be, the keepers of scientific thought. And to me, that's really just an interesting irony.
Yeah, the conservatives just make me so sick. Ben Shapiro says the facts don't care about your feelings. Their feelings do not give a damn about your facts. It's the wrong fight. It's stupid. It's stupid to even play that game. If somebody's mad, if somebody doesn't have what they think they should have, you educating them about anarcho-capitalism is not going to do anything but just waste your time and make them angry. The conservatives, and by the way, I said that this is a post-ideological political environment. This isn't about the great books, is it? The conservatives are post-ideological too. They've never had an ideology, but except to pump the brakes and go slow. Russell Kirk there's no ideology in Russell Kirk. There's not. The conservative movement has never been ideological either. They just want the United States or the political environment of whatever country they're in to look like it did 50 years ago when their parents were young. That's the only thing they want. They have no arguments, and they never have. And so the sooner they realize that they're not even ideologically sound, the better off we'll be.
The whole situation is very interesting, and I think that the best way to put it before we move on is, say that you are encountering some very angry Antifa type out in the street, and that person really hates you because he or she knows about your views, and you say, well, you're wrong in saying that I want some terrible thing to happen in society, because I really don't believe that, and if you take my views to their logical conclusion, you're not going to find that, and I'd be glad to explain it to you. The Antifa type will probably just hit you over the head with a bat or something like that. That's how these people operate. It's scary, but that is the the level they're on, so it's best just to avoid them.
Yeah, because it's post-ideological. It is about political power. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. From Mark Urjavec, what about Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton? Sir Francis Galton, of course, he's referring to here. I guess I'll take this one first. I have a profoundly good opinion of Francis Galton. I do very much appreciate his study of the human genome and its relation to society on the whole. He did some very good work on anthropology, also sociology, I guess you could say. He could be best described as a polymath, actually. He was much more interested in the societal application of scientific data than Darwin ever was. So I have a good opinion of him. Did Galton, though, contribute anything groundbreaking in a philosophical sense? I still don't think you could say that he did. He was more in sociology and anthropology, of course, in genetics. So I don't think you could really say he had a philosophy per se, but he was someone who really tried to understand how the world worked. But would he be considered an author of a great book of philosophy? I really don't think that would be an honest perspective, intellectually honest perspective. I mean, even though Galton absolutely had many, many great accomplishments under his belt. Anything to say about what Mark brought up, Scott?
The whole Galton Darwin thing is just fascinating to me. You know, that you've got these two giants really in this family. What, Galton's his uncle or something like that? Half cousin. I just looked it up.
Cousin, yes, cousin.
Cousins. So they had, they went to family picnics or something. Can you imagine what they talked about? Like, unbelievable. Galton's one of these guys. He's not fully been thrown under the bus because he's not as important to somebody like Darwin. No, I just love all those Englishmen there in there. Malthus and Galton and Darwin are just Jeremy Bentham and all this stuff on all their sociology work's just really interesting to me. But that being said, Galton, we don't read Galton in our program. I think his work is really good, but like you said, Joseph, great. Is that a 10,000 year book? Some of Galton's stuff, probably not.
I agree entirely. Galton definitely is worth reading, though. You just can't be intellectually honest and call him a giant of philosophy at the same time. From Wojak, question for both. What are your thoughts on the Stoics? Scott can definitely take this before I do. I'm sure he has far more interesting views than myself, but then I shall share my point of view.
The Stoics, this is going to get me in trouble probably. The Stoics kind of bug me. They're very popular. Ryan Holiday has made them very popular, and some other kind of modern bloggers and writers, and their books are easy to read. Aurelius's book is just is wonderful and easy to read. It's all these little aphorisms, but I think they deny something true and basic and real about the human condition. When your child dies, you should be sad. You should grieve. Human emotions aren't inhuman. And I think that we were meant to experience all of those, maybe not wallow. And so I think that maybe the soy boys of our time could probably take a few pages out of the Stoics. But I think we need to be careful with them, because I do think that they misunderstand or understate a lot of basic things about the human. And also, Stoicism really isn't a complete philosophy. They don't have a metaphysics. They don't really have an ethics. Being a Stoic doesn't really tell you how to treat other people and how to act in the polis. And it might tell you how to react to things, but it doesn't give you as much of a. It doesn't tell you what positive action looks like, and that's okay. That's okay. I think Aurelius and Lucretius and Epictetus all need to make the canon. They're all great books, but we need to be careful and not find something there that isn't. And I think that because of their popularity now, that I think that some people find things in them that just aren't there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that very often happens, unfortunately. It's like a form of hero worship, I think. Anyway, Wojak, to address what you said, Stoicism to me is a reactionary philosophy. And really, it's not just a lot of different things going to Stoicism. That's very broad to say it's a single philosophy. But I think that Stoicism really is designed for people who want to deal with the often harsh realities of life in as productive a way possible. So they try to become as resilient as possible. And that to me is the beating heart of Stoicism. So it is fine in that sense. But as Scott brought up, it doesn't cover a lot of things really, because you can't be reactionary all the time. You have to be proactive. You should be proactive much more than you're reactionary. If you're always reacting to something, that really the problem then is with you, because you're not thinking ahead as well as you should. So Stoicism is not bad in and of itself. I'm not here to say, it's not worth your time or whatnot. Certainly it is. But it's not going to get you really to where you need to go if you want to have a rich, full philosophy on life. Scott, anything to say about my point of view there?
Yeah, no, I keep just kissing your ass. Well, I agree with that. But if you're Epictetus, if you are a slave, you have no property, you cannot maintain your familial relationships, you can't self-actualize, if you can't be, a liberal person, somebody who's free, then Stoicism is probably what you need.
Yeah.
But he had very, very, very tight boundaries about him in terms of property, in terms of action, everything. So he wasn't concerned with a lot of the problems that we might have. But I think in every aspect of our life, or not in every, but in some aspects of our lives, we're Epictetus. I can imagine working in a modern workplace right now with the HR Karen down the hall is getting ready to jump your shit any minute because of you, stepping on the blasphemy law now or whatever. You're Epictetus in that moment, and you need to find a way to make the money that your family needs, right? And you need to find a way to live in that workplace and have some sort of dignity that maybe only you're aware of. And I think Epictetus and even Aurelius, who was, an emperor at that time, has some lessons about that. And so I like it very much for those reasons. Yeah. Wojak says here that he never thought of it as reactionary. You said it was reactionary. Absolutely, Stoicism is reactionary. I'm like, if Epictetus isn't reacting against his situation, there is no such thing as reactionary thought. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it in that way either, Joseph. But that's exactly right.
Well, thank you. No, when I first heard of Stoicism, I immediately came to mind that it was reactionary. But I'm glad that the idea of it being a reactionary philosophical school is gaining traction. I think, as you brought up, Scott, it's important to understand who really benefits from Stoicism. I think it'd be really the people at the very top or the very bottom who are constantly bombarded with problems. If you're an emperor and you have 10,000 things going wrong, you have to be stoic, because if you're not, you'll fall apart, and then everything around you will fall apart even more. If you're a slave and you're not stoic, you'll probably just kill yourself sooner or later, because the immense, hopelessness of your situation will be too much to bear. So Stoicism definitely has its place as a reactive measure, but as you mentioned, Scott, it's not the entirety of the philosophy of a life well lived.
Yeah, I want my philosophy to be based on rationality, sense data, etc. And to react isn't one of those things. Like, if one of the inputs into my philosophy, one of the things that informs my ideas is just a reaction to something else, I'm already in a shaky place. I need to go to bedrock. I need to find my axioms, A equals A, and I need to build from there. And if anywhere in that I'm reacting to something else and not evaluating it as true or false and embracing it because it's either true because it's true or rejecting it because it's false, I'm probably in a bad place, and that's probably where the Stoicism fails for me. So we got to be real careful with that. And Marcuse, that we were talking about earlier, he's reacting to what exists, these power structures that exist. He's reacting, and as a result, he loses his way. Epictetus, same thing. He's reacting. As a result, he doesn't present as beautiful and complete and wonderful and useful a picture as somebody like Aristotle, who can write the definitive work on metaphysics, ethics, politics, and poetics and rhetoric and art. You can't get there with reacting.
Agreed. And this is the last call. If you have a reasonable, responsible question or comment for Scott or for myself, please do leave in the live chat as a super chat, and we shall get to it before we go. But leave it in as soon as you can, because this is the last call. Thank you very much. in advance. Scott, something interesting to me when it comes to these destructive philosophies like critical theory, one finds that I think as time goes on, the proponents of it get a lot dumber. You cannot say that, Ibram X. Kendi is on the same level of, I suppose, insight as Herbert Marcuse was. Even if you don't like critical theory, one has to admit that Marcuse presented his views much better than Kendi does. There was at least an air of intellectualism about it with Marcuse, but with Kendi, I've read some of his stuff. And it's kind of like part of a memoir in which he feels sorry for himself, really, setting out his politics. And intellectually, it's just very, very, it's like, I don't know, it's like getting a funnel cake when what you really want is a New York strip steak. It's just not it's not very satisfying in its own way. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, that's the problem with all thought. There have been a lot of people that have walked the face of this earth who spent a lot of time thinking about things that are important to humans, and we have a lot of their writings. We've got Plato, we've got Aristotle, we've got all these things that you and I've talked about. And for somebody to jot something down and publish it, just because I got it published is no guarantee that it's any good. In fact, almost everything that's published is terrible. It's just really hard to do good work, to add to the canon, to move understanding forward. And we got to be really careful about what when we read. We're going to be really careful about that stuff. And, I hope to walk the earth for 86 years. And I'm 45. I'm over halfway done. I can't read it all. So I try to be very, very careful about what I read, because time's running out, and it's running out for all of us. So I've never read Kendi, and I'm not going to. There are about 7.5 billion books I have to read before I get to that. And it's just because it's so difficult to build on the work that's come before us. I could write something original, but it would be word salad. I just don't have respect for very much that's written. And by the way, I can't do it. I'll write an essay every now and then, I'll write a blog post every now and then, but I'm completely derivative. I can't do anything original. I'm not going to. I could try the rest of my days, 12 hours a day, to add to the fund of human knowledge, and would never be able to do it. I know that. So it's not surprising to me that that somebody brilliant makes a breakthrough and introduces a new idea, that everybody that follows them is derivative and weaker successively. The fact that we had a Socrates who taught Plato, who then taught Aristotle, is unbelievable. The fact that those guys knew each other and were each enormous thinkers who've, in my opinion, haven't been topped, it'll probably never happen again. If Marcuse was actually able to find a student, and maybe Mr. Gottfried was one of them, who was better than him, who then found another student that was in fact better than him, maybe they could move the ball. But it's just it's vanishingly small, the chances that we would get that again.
Yeah, I think today there's far less of an appetite for serious thought in popular culture. Emotionalism really is what rules the day, and that's always been the case for most of humanity, by the way. But now I think it's amplified, which is interesting because human beings nowadays have more access to information than ever before, so they have more of an opportunity than ever before to be well-read individuals who lead well-rounded lives. But we get the opposite instead. We get much more emotionalism, more rancor, and just a lot more BS on the whole.
Yeah, we sure do. Yeah. I just finished up reading a little Alistair McIntyre. I read his After Virtue, and he says, and I don't think this is original to him. He says that almost all arguments at this point are just perceived by the other person in the argument as you just tell them, "I want you to act like this." It's everything's emotivism, right? And again, we're just post-ideological. We're post-dialectical. It's all emotivism, and it's all power. It's all power seeking at this point. And man, I'll tell you, it's August 3rd right now, I was darkly depressed in June. Just watching all of this stuff going on in our political realm, wackadoo lockdown that nobody understands, and I was just like, "What is happening?" It just it's hard for me. It's hard for me to see progress. In fact, I don't. So reading these older books and reading these greats is an escape. Frankly, I'll say it. It's an escape. It's a safe place for me. I can hang out with my uncle Aristotle. He's never going to say anything crazy. Or if he says something I think is crazy, I need to stop because I'm probably the crazy one, and I need to figure out what I did wrong. And these things are a great comfort to me because everything else is so emotive and so confusing to me. Yeah.
And this is a very difficult time, really, to be a thinker, to be anyone who I think really tries to have a sense of understanding of the world that's not in tune with the approved narrative, whatever that might be. And that's not just about stuff like, a philosophy. It even is about election forecasting. It's really crazy stuff. And the groupthink and the mindless conformity necessary to breed that have ravaged our society, to say the absolute least.
Yeah, I don't know, there's an aesthetic almost that is rampant where in order for you to be perceived aesthetically as somebody who cares, then you have to act in a certain way. You have to be emotive, you have to be woke, and the whole thing is just gross. It makes me just want to be a hermit. It makes me want to, I've got a wife and kids and stuff, so I can't go join a monastery. But it makes me despair sometimes. But when I read, when I see what humans are capable of, I know that there's that we're capable of finding, exposing the good, the beautiful, and the true. It's a big help to me, and I just keep going there on and on and on. But I think our conversation tonight and these questions have been good. That's made me feel a little better.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad. We have to take good things where we can get them. And this conversation really has been great for me as well. I knew it was going to be good, but it exceeded my expectations quite a bit. And I think that there's been so much stuff which we've gone over here that people can learn from. And the point, of course, is that these great books should not be looked at as these, very stale artifacts of the past. They have relevance to current events. And that's why we're talking about them on a current event show.
Yeah, they're absolutely current. Plato's The Republic and Aristotle's Politics, in my opinion, either illuminate all of the problems of politics or solve them. Like the people on the left and even the conservatives seem to think that there's a solution that we can progress to that will solve all of our political woes. And Plato and Aristotle show us the way. Go read it yourself. I'm not going to mediate that for you. Go open them up and read them. You'll see that all of the problems that the political cycle that societies go through is predictable. Aristotle describes it. He describes in book 5 of the Politics what revolution looks like and all the permutations of revolution. He just nails it all down. And you can go either one. Go read the Republic, and then when you finish that up, go read Aristotle's Politics, and you'll see that everything in the political environment right now was predicted there. Those books are timeless. They're always relevant. It's unbelievable. The achievements just astounding for those guys, and they're living in these little bitty Greek city states, no telephone, no telegraph, no newspapers, and how they were able to be such keen observers of the human condition in the political environment and be able to draw the conclusions they draw and be right is unbelievable. I just bow down to those guys every day.
It is unbelievable. You're right. And it's often overlooked because today we take our technological conveniences for granted, but you're totally on point. It really is something else. And it makes these great books all the more valuable, in my very humble opinion. I was just looking through the live chat. I don't see anything else for us. So I think this is the point at which we shall depart. But it goes without saying, Scott, you're welcome back on the show. The next time, my co-host, Paul Gottfried, definitely needs to be here because you and him will get along famously. He's just a very busy guy now. He's the editor of Chronicles magazine, so he has a lot of stuff on his plate. But really, this was an outstanding chat, and I do look forward to you and Paul conversing in another episode, as long as you're interested in coming back on, of course.
Man, I love to have a chat like this. I could do this all day, every day. You say when, and I'm here, man.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott. And I do want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you just watched, whether you participate in the live chat, or if you did a super chat. If you did the super chat, I shall raise my glass to you. And
what is in that? Is that strawberry Kool-Aid? What are you drinking there?
It is Ocean Spray Diet Cranberry Apple Juice with only 1 gram of sugar. So I'm trying not to get diabetes or cavities, and I've been successful thus far. So I'm going to stick with it. I would rather be having Coca-Cola, though, or an egg cream. But unfortunately, that's not in the cards right now.
Good man. Well, thanks for having me on, man. This is a delight. Great questions and good fun.
Excellent fun, excellent question, excellent responses, Scott, I should say. An excellent question from the audience and excellent responses from you. Really, I learned stuff here. I think it's fair to say that everyone else did. And take care, everyone. Steer clear of rioters and COVID. Have a great night. Bye-bye.